All right, let's jump right into it. Thanks everybody for attending episode number 22 and Let's Talk Recruiting. We took the week off last week, just given everything that was going on in our country. Didn't feel right to be talking about things that were less important. Let's just keep it that way, keep it simple. But I think we're on the right track again, so we're going to jump back into our sessions starting again this week. And just to let everybody know, these sessions we started doing here in Q2 going really well. So I'm going to be soon starting to send out the calendar for Q3. That'll probably come out next week, and I'll be sending out sessions for that. So we're going to keep this thing going. So today's topic is 5 misconceptions about recruiting. We have representation from across the country, both coast and in the middle. And with us today, we have Joseph Archilla. Did I get it right?
You did.
Oh, okay, thank God. And Shawnee, Joseph is out of New York City. Shawnee Phillip, did I get that right? Okay. Out of New York. And Myra Alfaro out of Los Angeles. And I know I got that one right, didn't I?
Alfaro.
Alfaro. Oh, my apologies.
Okay.
Out of Los Angeles area with myself, and then Sean Racco out of Chicago. And please tell me I got that one right.
You nailed it.
All right, okay, good. I picked 1 out of 4, I guess. All right, so what we're going to do is sort of a roundtable discussion, talk about misconceptions in recruiting. I just want to start off, when I started in recruiting, it took me about a week to realize it was not what I thought it was going to be, and you learn that pretty quick. It's totally not what people think it is until you get in the game. So we're going to start off our roundtable, and Joseph, we're going to go to you. Start off with your key item that you wanted to address.
Sure. Thanks, and welcome everybody. Good to meet you all. Can I share a presentation? Just a couple slides?
Sure.
All right. So while I'm looking for that, the misconception. Yeah.
Your screen. It should be probably wherever your hover bar is. There you go. We see it.
Okay. Actually.
Yeah, you're sharing your emails, just so you know.
All right. Let's see if I can get to the presentation. How's that?
Perfect.
Whoop. It's gone again. Is it there?
Yep.
Okay, great. So it's funny. So I'm Joe Archilla. I work in the city from Marshall McLennan. I don't know how many of you heard of the company, but we have 75,000 employees worldwide. In the New York City headquarters office, where nobody is at right now, is about 4,000 colleagues of ours. So we're all working remotely, and it's been actually, I think, more positive than negative in terms of what we've learned. So we had a meeting with our team around the engagement meeting or the intake session, and one of the things that came out was, the misconceptions about recruiting and how easy it is. And, most managers engage the recruiter or engage the recruiting department thinking they can just basically open a rec and place the order, and the recruiter will go and figure out everything. And that there's not much that they need to do, which I'm not going to tell anyone on this call that that's not true. But just to expand on that, one of the other questions that had come up, which this kind of overlaps a little bit with, is, the recruiter's role. Are they a salesperson or they HR? I think the role of the recruiter is the most dynamic role, most complex role. And it's probably why, Sean, you didn't think it was what you thought it would be, because there's so many other layers and so many other dimensions to it that no one realizes until you're in it and you're actually trying to do it. And that's the problem we have with people who are asking for our support from a service standpoint. They're in that same position you were in when you first thought about that job and what it might be. So they're thinking, okay, I need a call center representative, and there's, that's it. You'll go find one for me.
Yep.
So, I say the recruiter's role is a combination of being an HR professional, because there's all kinds of dimensions there. A consultant for sure. So we use the word talent acquisition consultant in our organization. And I remember one of the CHROs saying, "What does that mean? This CHRO, I don't understand what that means. That's so complicated. Why can't you just call them a recruiter?" So I thought that was interesting. It's missing the point, right? That we are consultants. And yes, there's a sales component, right? And I'll talk a little bit about that. Recruiters are trainers and coaches and more. So, I just really kind of laid out, probably this is not exhaustive. There's many more dimensions, but at a high enough level without going too deep, there's just so many elements, right? Think about, how do we help the organization and the hiring manager understand the dynamics of recruiting? And so what we came out of in our engagement meeting trainings was just that, making sure that we have all these dimensions covered in that intake session, although that could be a long meeting. So you have to do that over time, right? Across the cycle. But, starting with like technology, this function is the most advanced technologically than all other HR functions, in my opinion. We have all the cutting edge AI. We have all the cutting edge, machine learning, with the matching capabilities and engagement with the candidate and prospects on various platforms and career sites. We also have all of the ATS components, right? And many of these companies, including ours and other large corporations, have moved to manager self-service, but that's not so easy. So a recruiter is basically a technology enabler in that they have to help all of the stakeholders, managers, candidates, and others in the organization, when we start talking about data and reporting, how to navigate the technology, how to use the technology to get to where we want to be, and not just guessing and throwing around all the anecdotal things that go along with, recruiting is broken, it needs to be fixed, and those kinds of things. And you can see some of the others, human resources, right? That's the HR hat, policies, procedures, where we post, how we post, what we say in the job advert, how we position the role, explaining and talking about how to bring in diverse candidates, what a diverse candidate slate looks like, and how you work through that, why it's important and how it adds value. From that to metrics, requisition. So the interesting things we were talking about are, is it a sales role? Well, recruiters are managed kind of like salespeople in many firms, right? I mean, they're looking at how many requisitions are they filling? How fast are they filling them? What are the satisfaction rates and some of those things that you find in sales and client-facing type of roles. So let me pause there because I've said a lot in a real short time, and we can talk more about some of the other components as well. But I just wanted to get a reaction maybe from the group.
Hey, Joe, a question. Yeah, a question for you coming from that consultative angle. Are you finding yourself, this isn't not in relation to backfill positions, but when you come about planning for net new hiring, right? And when the company's in that growth mode, are you kind of getting involved in that planning or forecasting? I know it's not, sometimes they don't know they're going to need people and you hear about it as they need it. But when that opportunity is there, there's some forecasting being done. To your point about technology, I know Workday's trying to get there around forecasting.
Yeah.
Are you involved in yourself in those early stages?
So I am personally, but not most of the recruiters are not. I think most of the recruiters are not aware of the forecast on a bigger scale. That's a good point. I mean, there's probably an opportunity to get the recruiters more involved. But forecasting is a difficult thing for our organization. We don't do it well. And for many years, we didn't do it at all. So we've only really tried to forecast in the last couple of years. And that's usually done at the core, with the core leadership team.
I'm working with a company now where, to your point, the head of recruiting is involved in it, their VP of TA, and their managers are being responsible for forecasted hiring to make sure they're on track to the point where they're getting a spiff, a bonus when they hit their numbers.
Oh, wow.
Of course, the recruiters asked, "Do we get a part of that?" And
Yeah,
no,
right.
it's just for
Who gets the bonus?
sales. Yeah, it was with the sales team, so that goes hand in hand.
Okay,
But
yeah.
it's interesting to see that level and that connection with hiring, connecting with the recruiting and strategy about getting there was real interesting.
Yeah, I do that now actually with my current organization. I partner directly with the hiring team to look at where they're at now. And we also look at how long does it take to onboard somebody. So they always want to wait last minute to hire. Well, we're going to wait because we don't need anybody right now. But when we need somebody, we're going to onboard them for 6 weeks. So it's like, well, so technically we really need to hire now in preparation for that time frame. And some of them are very receptive and they say, yes, you're the expert. And some of them are like, I'm the manager. I know my people. I know my department. I don't need to do that. And so again, it's like that you're that consultant to them because you're the expert in this area. But then they feel like they're the expert in their area and you're just the recruiter sometimes. So
yeah, we have a pretty well spelled out kind of hiring strategy by quarter here at my firm, and myself, we're getting more involved in it from the talent side because I think we know a little bit more about seasonality of hiring and availability of talent. So I've been giving visibility to my team since I've joined of what that plan is, especially my sourcers, so that we can build the pipelines for it and be ready for it versus just jumping in and reacting.
Yeah. Yeah. So actually, since we were talking about ISOMs, you can actually create a pipeline requisition. And so I like to post that when we're anticipating growth or anticipating somebody leaving. You kind of feel like maybe they're about to go. We just put that position up so that way, passive people can just apply and we can kind of build our pipeline and get to know them. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's not. Sometimes I have this pipeline forever and the position's just not opening up. And, again, I go to the manager and I say, hey, based on this, like we should just not even bother with this position right now, or let's wait. So I think it just depends on who you're recruiting for, the manager.
Myra, when you talk about the pipeline building aspect of it, are you bringing that information to the managers? Just for an example, years back, we did this with a unique skill set where when we built that pipeline, we would have the people, their title, and the companies that they worked at, where we've connected with them and bring those into manager meetings so they can see exactly what and who the pipeline is. Do you get into detail like that?
Yeah. So I send them. I want to talk to these people first, so I'll talk to them first, make sure they're even a viable candidate for me to present to the manager, since it is just a pipeline. And then I'm able to say, hey, since we have a need coming up in like 4 weeks and this awesome person just applied, let's move up the hiring so that way we don't lose out on this person, right? 4 weeks is a long time to have somebody waiting, and so we can open up a position for them sooner. So it's helpful in that we get a lot of people interested, but then again, you're just making sure they're qualified candidates for the managers. But I do bring them up. I meet with my managers every week. Sometimes it's every other week. And I bring all those candidates to them and I say, hey, these are the people that that I pipelined for us to be able to hopefully present an opportunity to, if we have one.
Hey, Sean, I've got a great tool called Talent Wall that's really great for kind of visualizing the recruitment process and the pipeline process. It's a newer one out there. We're one of probably their first dozen or two companies that are partnered with them. So fairly cheap and really great for being able to kind of visualize that with the manager. So if anybody's looking for something like that, I would definitely do some research into it.
Mm-hmm.
Talent Wall.
Talent Wall, right?
Yeah, Talent Wall. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, Joe, to your point, that consultative piece, I just think when you're sharing information and you're sharing your knowledge, it just takes so many steps towards getting that feel back from the hiring team to be that consultant. I think so. Always sharing always seems to show that you know what you're doing, right? And getting that information before them.
Yeah, the kind of things that, Myra and Sean were talking about, when you bring that to the table, I think that's how you build your credibility.
Absolutely.
You know?
Shawnee, did you have anything to add? If not, we can sort of jump into your item also.
Not really. For us and for us at ICE and for a lot of my roles, we don't really do a lot of forecasting. We actually don't have to. We have a lot of live jobs and live opportunities that come up. So we're sort of just always in the hunt from a sourcing perspective and, looking for candidates in real time. I support technology, so it's a little bit different. There are a lot of gaps in that space. There's always we're always looking for a QA engineer or always looking for a Java developer. So even, where sometimes we don't have necessarily a job per se, but we know it's coming because we know what the makeup of the team looks like, and we know it's coming down the line. So we're sort of always passively creating those pipelines, but they turn into very real opportunities.
Got it. Right. Let's jump into your item, Shawnee. Just keeping an eye on the clock.
Sure. So hi, everyone. I'm Shawnee Phillip. I'm representing Intercontinental Exchange. It's a tongue twister. And I used to say ICE, and people would always go, I'm sorry, what? At ICE. So now I actually say Intercontinental Exchange. We are a global exchange, and one of our acquisitions we're most known for is that we own the New York Stock Exchange. So my topic is, I wanted to talk a little bit about the misconception that recruiters don't have a real hand in the hiring process. I hear that from people all the time, especially from my candidates. They always, when we end our conversations, for them, it's very final. I think they don't expect to ever hear from me again. They think they're going to be handed off or passed over to another person. And so for us, that's not the process. And in many places that I've worked as a recruiter, we're responsible for a variety of the process, variety of measures in the process. So yes, we source and, we pass resumes on to our managers and we help get the interview process squared away. But we are also responsible we're that touch point. We are the hands. And a lot of times we're the voice that's consistent with our candidates. So for example, when I find a candidate that I think is great and I have my first interview with them, I find that candidates are a little bit more relaxed with me. Sometimes they're not as sharp. And a lot of times I find that they're not as prepared as I think they will be when they are actually on with the hiring manager. And I think it's because the misconception is, oh, this is just the first step. I just have to talk to the recruiter, and then it gets serious when I get passed on to a hiring manager. And so I think it's important for people to know that it's equally as serious when you have your conversation with me, because I'm taking notes. I'm a note taker. I'm a pen and pad kind of girl. So I'm on the phone, I have your resume, and I'm writing down a lot of what you say. I'm asking specific targeted questions that I know my managers are going to be looking for answers to. But I'm also taking notes on how you present, candidates present, what they say, how they say it, if they're confident in their answers, if they seem a little unsure. I'm taking notes about whether or not they ask me real tangible questions about the role, about the organization, because those are also things that I pass on to the hiring manager when I have my conversation with them. And so, yes, we all get busy, and sometimes, may not always be as responsive as we could be. And we do try, but I think it's important for people to understand that, we play a really pivotal role in the hiring process. A lot of times when managers are, between 2 or 3 candidates that are really strong and they're trying to figure out how to edge one out over the other, they will circle back to us as recruiters and say, hey, what was your take on it? Which person did you think presented better, or who, just little things that people necessarily don't think about in the interview process. They think it's sort of like, the managers want to know, was this person strong? Were they sharp? Did they ask questions? Did they seem engaged? And sometimes it's hard because if I don't get that from a candidate, but the manager gets it, when the manager is sort of looking for me to co-sign that, it's a little harder for me. I'm like, didn't kind of get that, but I'm glad you did, right? So I always say to my candidates, in the beginning, treat this call as if you were talking to the hiring manager. Be knowledgeable, be ready for those hard questions, be ready to tell me who you are, give me your elevator pitch. Please don't start at the bottom of your resume and work all the way up. just be sharp and just be ready, because that's what it takes to move on to the next level, to hiring manager. And we very much are involved in the, final process. We're involved in compensation conversations sometimes if it's a really good candidate and we need to talk to the manager about pushing that salary a little bit higher. If we don't have that conversation, no one is going to have it. So we are, we're intricately involved. And so I think it's just important to let people know that take it seriously when you get an email from a recruiter. Take it seriously when you get an email that says, hey, do you have some time this week? Can we connect? That's a real thing. I am calling you about a real job that is on my desk with a salary, with a hiring manager and a team. It is not just because I want to talk because it's Tuesday.
Hey, Shawnee, when it comes to that prepping that you're doing for the candidate for the call with you, once they have that call with you and you're moving them forward, are you prepping them for that hiring manager that they're about to go interview with? Or are you kind of leaving them to kind of get themselves ready?
So the phone screen, I do at the tail end, tell them what the process is in terms of what next steps would look like. And I give them a little insight into who the manager is. I will say, this is the manager's name. You should look him or her up on LinkedIn. This is sort of their interview style. This is how they like to move forward. It's 30 minutes, it's 45 minutes, it's a WebEx, it's a phone call. I try to give them as much information as I possibly have. And I do circle back if I get information from the manager that I think is really important that the candidate should have in advance of their call.
So you're almost kind of like Joe was talking about the candidate to the hiring team. You're kind of like, or not a candidate to the hiring team, a consultant to the hiring team, but you're also that consultant to the candidates in a way. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Yeah, because once we hand them off to the hiring manager isn't circling back for any additional questions or to say, hey, how did you go? How did it feel? What did you think? They're sort of just moving them along through the process. So it's on us as recruiters to be that person that turns back and says, hey, how did the interview go? How did you feel? Do you have any questions? Was there anything that you felt like you wanted to talk about that you didn't get to in enough time? Shoot me an email, let me know, and I'll forward it over to the manager, or I'll go back and get that question answered for you. Same thing for managers. Sometimes I have managers that will say, hey, that 30 minutes went really, really quick. I have a couple more questions. Any chance you can get them answered for me? And I'll say, we can do two things. I can schedule another 30-minute call for you to do that, or I'm happy to go back to the candidate myself and get the questions answered.
So I love that, because I feel like especially your candidate is a representation of you and your firm and the quality that you can provide, especially when we're, asking them to pay us. And so I love to prep my candidates beforehand, even if it's just like a phone call with the hiring manager, like a quick, hey, this is just a quick, phone interview before we go to panel. And I'll do the same thing. I even will say, hey, your interview is on Tuesday at 10 o'clock with this person. Here's their LinkedIn. Yeah. And then I quickly follow up with, and I'll say, hey, call me when you're done. Right. And then it also kind of gauges if it's like they call me 15 minutes later, I'm like, oh, that probably wasn't a good call, right? But if they
that didn't go well.
Right. If they call me 30 minutes, 40 minutes later, then I'm like, okay, tell me everything. And the reason why I also like to do that with my candidates is because if they do pass on this candidate, I now have feedback from what the hiring manager is also looking for. Yeah. Right now I can go and share that information with my next candidate and say, hey, they're going to ask this question, be prepared for this, they're going to talk about this. And now I'm setting the stage up for my next candidate. Even if they didn't pass on that candidate, I can better prep my other candidates. And I do that like the whole way. Even if it's like, hey, we're going to fly them in to interview, I'm like, CC me on that travel rate, like CC me on everything, because I want to be the one that can hand hold this candidate to the very end. And I'm the same way. I'm like, I want to make the offer. Like, you don't make the offer. Let me do this. I want to talk money with them. Like, I will do everything because, if there's HR people here, hi, but also you're not trained in that, capacity of how to give an offer. And it's not just like, hey, your base salary is this, right? There's so much more to that. And so I want to be able to do that. And so, yeah, I agree. You have to, the same way you consult with the client, you have to consult with your candidate. Very similar.
Yeah, I think part of it too is, as a recruiter, you are sort of a brand ambassador for your organization. Yeah. right? And so you are the face. You are the person that the candidate is connected with. Their candidate experience is hinged on how it started with you. And at the end, the candidate experience, whether they're hired or not, is still hinged on, they think back to the manager, but they always circle back to my fellow HR folks, you know this is true. They always circle back to, you know, the recruiter called me, the recruiter emailed me, and sometimes I don't have feedback, right? I don't always have something to give. And I will send a note and just say, hey, I know it's been a week. The manager is still, you know, interviewing, or the manager is incredibly busy or on travel. Just want you to know things are still moving a little slower than usual, especially right now because everyone's home and we're doing everything virtually. But I think if you have the mindset as that you are your organization's brand ambassador, and it's incumbent upon you to make sure that your candidates walk away really feeling like as an organization they were valued even in the interview process, it goes a long way out in the marketplace.
And they're going to remember you as a recruiter, right? And so if I always think back to one of my stories of like, I had this candidate who, she was a director level, but she just didn't want to do that. So her next step wasn't going to be another director. And so I just kind of kept following up with her. I kept the report going. A year and a half later, I finally was able to place her in the position that she wanted. And it was something like, I told her, I was like, I'm not going to stop like being your, you know, your recruiter until I find you something. But because I consulted with her and I was just, you know, I was very direct on what I was looking for and what she was looking for, we were able to finally make a placement for her.
Yeah, and I think it's important too for candidates to identify whether you're working with an agency recruiter or you're working with an internal person from the talent acquisition side.
Mm-hmm.
Get the experience is going to be completely different when it's talent acquisition. They'll be able to answer a lot of your questions faster, much more directly. They have the ability to either turn around or make a phone call or get on the elevator and get those questions answered. So, you know, it's a tough road no matter. I remember being on the candidate side and interviewing and talking to thousands of recruiters and feeling like I was just like in a, you know, a swell of recruiters, never to be seen or heard from again. But I definitely know the difference between the opportunities and experiences I've had with talent acquisition recruiters that were internal, that were able to really position me differently. And like to your point, Myra, even if I didn't get the role, it was, listen, here's all the great feedback, stay connected, you never know when something's going to happen. And that's how we build those pipelines that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Sean, were you going to add something?
No, not on top of that. I mean, I think it's all great stuff. Like I love their candidate touch points, like not letting people get lost in the process and don't forget the details. Like that's hugely important.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought you were positioning yourself to jump in there. Myra and Shawnee were going deep. Hey, Myra, let's roll into your item because I think it's a nice overlay into the item that you were bringing to the table.
Yeah, so I started recruiting. I don't know how you get into recruiting. You just kind of land in recruiting, right? So I studied something totally different, and I was working in a hospital, and but my background was all sales, and I got into, while I was working at the hospital, I started hiring nurses. I do healthcare recruiting, and I loved the part where I was actually talking to candidates and the part where I was getting to know, why did you choose this field? Why did you choose this career? Why did you choose this specialty? And everything else, I was like, oh, I don't want to fill out anything else. I just want to talk to people, hire them. And I think it was just, I realized, then I got into third party, and they were very much like, this is a sales job. You're an account executive. You're not a recruiter. And I felt like, well, no, because this is a sales job, but this is also, there's like, you know, Joe was saying, it's so much more than just sales. But I now work on the internal side. I know I say I went to the dark side because I love executive recruiting. I love third party, but family dynamics changed. So I had to get a little bit of work in on the internal side. And I loved that when I got in, it was very typical of the HR role. It was just HR people that was making up the recruiting team, and they didn't have any background in sales. They didn't have any background in recruiting. And I was able to bring a little bit of my sales, a little bit of my customer service, and my knowledge of hospital administration, my knowledge of just very little of HR. I mean, I have no HR background. and to really say, hey, like, you don't have to have them apply to interview them, right? You have their resume right in front of you. They sent you the resume. They want you. Let's interview them, versus well, they need to apply first, and then the application process is so long and you lose them. And so that's where I say it is the sales. That's where your sales pitch is. When somebody is going to apply and they're thinking about it, you have to convince them why they should send you your resume, why your organization, why this organization, why you, essentially, why should they, like Shani was saying, like, why should they be working with you as an exclusive recruiter, right? And so you do have to understand that it is a sales, because you're trying to sell them this opportunity, this organization, the company, even the salary. Maybe their salary expectations is a lot higher, and you got to bring them back down to earth and say, hey, I'm sorry, this is reality. This is not what they're going to pay you. And you have to understand where they're at and see how you can help them. And so there's been times where I've told candidates, I just don't think this is the right opportunity for you. But I definitely will keep you in mind for something else. And that's where that consultant piece comes in. For my old organization that I left, it was very much so, it's very HR driven, and I had no idea what our marketing looked like. I had no idea what our ads were going to look like, our hiring ads. I had no idea that we were going to do, the job descriptions were just very generic. And it was just something that I felt wasn't aligned with what recruiting is now. And it's under the HR umbrella, and we only had a director of HR that was over recruitment. And I felt like that was such a disservice to what recruitment really is. And so we were able to bring in a director of talent acquisition and actually now connect with marketing, because I feel like it's such a more marketing brand, branding. It's under that umbrella that I feel like recruiting should connect with more so than just, your director of HR. And we want to, I don't know, so I feel like it's, when you have a lot of HR people just in your recruiting team, you're going to see a lot of like applications and processes, and it can distract the candidate, and they're just not interested anymore, because it just took so long for me to even upload my resume, because I had to fill out this application that takes so long. And they're not getting back to me because I'm lost in the resume, black hole of resumes, versus I'm a real person. Like, you can call me, you can text me whenever you want. I'm here for you. I work for you, and I work for the organization. Like, I am here for both of you. Like, I don't choose one or the, I can't make a placement if I don't have a candidate, and I can't, in the same way, I can't place anybody if I don't have a position to place. So I think it's important to let your candidate know that, and to also let your HR, like, we may need to reevaluate how we're doing our hiring. It's not just, post and pray that somebody applies anymore. It's, what are we posting? How are we posting it? What's the application process like? How long does it take for somebody to apply? What's our branding? What's our marketing look like? All of that is under the sales portion of recruiting, that I feel we think it's just looking at resumes and sending them along, right?
Myra, quick question for you, and this sort of goes to the whole panel. So I had a conversation a couple of weeks back with a Silicon Valley company who's really around their hiring developers. So sticking with your theme of, hey, there's sales traits in recruiting. You were talking a lot about getting the people to apply and getting them in the process. The conversation I had was around they were segmenting duties within their process, because they're after developers, high demand, lots of work out there for them, where recruiters are segmenting duties and only being closers. So they only handled people once the offer got there, and their job was to close on offers. Does anybody ever, that was the first time I've seen this, where that's all you do is close. And there were big metrics behind it, there were issues around it, but they were specializing in closing. The whole can't remember the name of the movie, the ABC, Always Be Closing. And that's third party talk, right? But this was inside corporate recruiting. I won't name names because it was really interesting that we got into that detail. But has anybody heard of, hey, all you do is close on candidates? Inside, internal?
Dangerous.
Oh, here.
Why do you say dangerous?
Because you don't know nothing about this candidate. So how can you close them if you don't know what they're needing, right? I mean, I've had people take pay cuts like 20,000 because this new job is 7 miles versus now they're driving versus them driving 90 minutes a day. Now they just, 15. So you don't know that, you don't have that conversation to say, hey, I know we're not really offering you what you wanted, but here's all these other awesome benefits that you're getting. You're going to be closer to home. I mean, you don't know that from this candidate. So if your job is just to roll out the offer, what can you offer them besides, again, what's just black and white? And I think recruiting is like definitely living in the gray. Like you're not black and white. You have to come up with, like, I don't know, unicorn stuff.
I think that then turns it back into, it feeds back into what we're talking about here, right? The misconceptions that we're only involved in bits and pieces and not holistically from start to finish. And I think it becomes it's a matter of being like super robotic, right? Because if all I did was sat at a desk and waited for someone to call me and say, hey, extend an offer, what? Like, you know what I mean? Like it's easy to get lost in that because to my point, you don't know the candidate. You don't know what their needs are. You don't know, you don't know if they potentially have, I know for me, like through the process, if my candidates end up with another offer or something else looks like it's coming through, they call me, they want to know, where am I in this process? This is what's happening. If you're just closing, you have no idea that there's potentially another organization extending or about to extend an offer that completely takes you out of the running. And that could be the manager's first choice. And now you lose a candidate because you have no idea that you had this fierce coming through the back door.
Yeah.
I was going to say we hire for technical talent in Chicago here. And I mean, to hire principal level software engineers, for example, like those people aren't coming to our organization without some sort of relationship built in. They're not, a lot of them have abandoned LinkedIn profiles. They're not, out there responding to those things. You've got to develop a relationship with them as a recruiter. So you can't just be at the end. You've got to be there months before they're even looking for a job. And that's my sourcers are pretty focused in on kind of talent mapping Chicago on those tough roles and just building those relationships with them.
Absolutely. In the technology space, Sean, you're 100% right. It is about relationships because whether there's calls or emails from people that are currently working for us or even people that maybe have worked with us before, have friends, everyone, that's a very deep network, that technology space. And so you're always being filtered resumes and filtered people who are looking, but they're not, going through LinkedIn. They're not applying into Taleo through the role as posted. Just sort of from a technology perspective, that's just not how those folks operate. You have to redirect them and say, hey, here's the link, go on and apply. But they're only going to do that after someone has made contact with them and they know that this is a real thing. So be just on the back end of closing, I can't see how it builds. It doesn't do anything for the organization. If you're concerned about, your standing in terms of in the marketplace, like what are people saying about you? That's not what you want people saying, is that your recruiters are only involved at the tail ends.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. I won't name names because it got up in the conversation because we're talking about reporting and metrics and he was trying to track his offer decline rate. And my history is usually if you have a decline rate higher than 5%, that's just sort of what I've been around. I'm like, once you get to that stage, I'm like, most people are accepting, aren't they? And he's like, oh no. We're at 40% decline.
Wow.
Whoa. Okay.
Wow.
So there's an issue going on here.
Yeah.
But
a little bit.
I get it. Yeah. And this is developers, and they were saying how in that world, in that location, it came down to the dollar. So in my mind, it was like, it's kind of like when you buy a car, you're dealing with the salesman. And then when it's money, here comes the money man walk in or money woman to talk financials.
I know there's
Interesting
markets that are
approach.
like that. Some markets are just really hot, and they can shop around. Like in India, that was a big thing for a long time. they just had competing offers. Some countries in Europe, they take the offer and then they have these long waiting periods. So they use that time to shop around sometimes and show another prospective employer, hey, I got this offer, pending offer. And, they end up going over there, getting a few more dollars.
I gotta say, there's nothing more demoralizing to me, at least in recruiting, is when you have that candidate, you get the offer, and then they take a counter offer. Like,
I know.
It hurts so bad.
But see, like, here's the thing too. Even as an internal recruiter now, I cover counter offer. I said, hey, and are you gonna? And this is probably old school because my like trainer was definitely would say, hey, are you when you go and give your notice, how are they going to take it? Are they going to be excited for you because this is an awesome opportunity, or are they going to throw more money at you and you're going to be happy for 6 months and then you're going to call me back? Like, let the candidate know that you're covering the counter offer without actually saying are they going to counter offer you, right? Is your team going to be excited? Are they going to see that this is a great thing for you? Or are they just going to throw more money at you to keep you, but you're still going to be doing the same? And that gets them thinking, like, I don't know, right? And so when they do give that offer, now that's like, oh, they definitely took the low road and they're just trying to throw more money at me. And I'm just, and for me, and I don't know how it is for you guys as I do healthcare, if somebody's just in it for the money, like it's like a red flag for me. Like if that's, because then in 6 months, they're going to go to the next company that offers them more money. And it's not, so I don't pursue those candidates as much as I would somebody who had real meat to their decision and taking a job.
Sean, do you want to jump into your item? We'll hit you there.
Sure. So mine was more kind of focused on, the misconception that recruitment isn't metrics driven and numbers driven. The approach that I've taken in my organization and the last one that I worked at as well was really to be efficient and be smart with funnel management, and looking at our ratios of, what my recruiters, how often, how many candidates resumes they look at, how many of those turn into phone interviews, turn into, next level phone screens with managers, into interviews, offers, and hires, and building out KPIs around those to say, okay, like only 29% of the phone screens you're doing as a recruiter are leading into phone screens for the hiring manager. Let's be more efficient in terms of what we're doing there, having metrics around that to say, let's drive smarter conversations and not waste times on candidates that we can start to see, even visually just aren't like the right fit for the role. So really big on kind of funnel management and understanding the process it takes to get a hire. And the cool thing out of that is that we've been able to do here that I think is valuable to everyone on this panel is by knowing those funnels, we can help predict if they've got a hire in the pipeline. So by running through those ratios, we can say, listen, as of right now, it looks like based on your funnel, you've got 3 hires out of this pool. And sometimes we only need 1, sometimes we need 10, like we do for data analysts right now. So being able to visualize that and metric kind of focus approach to that has been really valuable to make my team be smarter and more efficient in the process they're doing. And it's also helped with agency evaluation and understanding what they do and how they process things, figuring out who we should work with. So those are the big kind of metrics that I live on. But then the last one is really focused on experience. I think, some of the stuff that Myra and Shawnee were saying, really bleeds to that. Like, I want to understand how the hiring manager interacts with my team, how they interact with candidates, how the candidates feel about their interactions with my team and with the interviewers that they're working with. So that we can make sure that we're improving that process. So it's all like, it comes down to almost that like marketing side of it. Like, are we all sharing the same message? Are we on the same page about what the culture is or what the challenges of our environment are? Or what our, our strategic plan looks like? Like, these are the questions that candidates often have that if we're not effectively kind of surveying them to understand if we're all answering them the same way, we're not going to land these tough to fill positions. So I think, for me, that metric driven approach to recruitment is really valuable, and something that I think people don't necessarily understand how much work goes into developing that strategy.
Sean, do you divide your metrics up by, let's say we're talking about the funnel. Are you dividing up by like business unit, or are you just looking at recruiting as a whole?
Individual team members, so what their process is, but we can also pull it by department as well. And then we can dig into it even where, we can look at our dropout rates. So, if we see a bunch of candidates falling out at technical phone screens, we might realize that we've got an issue there about how those technical screens are being conducted. Or so we can get the data we've got is really valuable, because we can look at by department, by recruiter, and by hiring manager to identify problems that are in the process.
Yeah, in the past, I've delivered reports out like that to department heads. And then a couple weeks later, you'll get these emails from people in those departments. Hey, can you put me on that list, that distribution list? So once you start sharing that information, when it's well organized and it's answering the questions they have, it's really interesting to see when the business comes in and starts, hey, can I see that? Type deal.
Good credibility, right? Like everybody's kind of been saying, like the more you can share.
Yeah, you know what you're doing, exactly.
The more they're going to know what you're doing and the value you're providing.
Stay ahead of the game. I always like to say, answer the questions before they answer them. That's
I think those reports are also really helpful for the businesses more than anything, because it helps them identify where some of their issues are. Sometimes hiring managers really aren't aware of what their process looks like on the other side. And so sometimes you can have those metrics where, you'll have someone, a business head, for example, say, well, why is it taking so long to fill this role? You now have the metrics to say, well, we opened the role on this date. We've received X number of applications, this number of interviews, this number of people on the technical side that didn't pass the assessment. So it gives them a holistic view of why it's taking so long. And now they can decide if they want to shift and do some things a little bit different, or if they just want to go, okay.
And I also like tracking, like, from start to finish, right? Like, we had this intake session on this day. I sent you X amount of candidates on this day. Mm-hmm. You don't give me feedback. So even if you're like, I even tell them, like, if you're rejecting this candidate, just tell me instead of not talking to me, because I'm sending you the same candidates based on what our intake section was. Right. But if if it's changed, then we need to update what I'm looking for. Or maybe, I've sent so many candidates and they're like, well, actually I wanted them to have the certification. And I'm like, well, that was actually just preferred when we first talked, and now you're requiring it. That changes my search, that changes who I'm targeting, that changes a lot. So I like to even track, like, we submitted X amount on this day, X amount of candidates. Like, I'm not going to send you anymore until you give me this feedback.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I keep a tracker, like, for myself, where I have when the role opened, how many people applied through Taleo, or how many people came to me through LinkedIn. I put, the information about interviews, what feedback I got. And so for me, I try to have weekly or bi-weekly calls with my hiring managers, and I try to nail them to the wall. It doesn't happen very often, but to nail them to the wall, I'm like, listen, you've interviewed 12 people already and you want to keep seeing more candidates. Like, let's talk about this for a second. What are you not seeing? What's not working? Is it the process where you're not getting what you need? Is it the resume process? Like, let's take a beat. Mm-hmm. This out, because I also have 12 other roles that I have to do this for.
But then
work with me.
Internal applies and you're like,
and then I'm managing my email from someone like, hey, Shawnee, my great friend from college thinks this is awesome, and I'm like, great, me too.
I'll have like, hey, our chief of surgery actually really brought in his own director, and I'm like, all right, well, that was 6 weeks of but hey, I've created
time I can't get back.
But I've created my pipeline, and I have these candidates, and that's why you it is a sales job in the sense where you keep your your candidates there, and at the same time you have to sell that candidate to the hiring team. Like, why is my candidate better than that chief of surgery's referral?
So my manager, her least favorite metric is time to fill, because she said at least 50% of it is on the manager side or something TA can control, right? So like you were talking about keeping those notes, but we're trying to get it so that the system can track all of that and we can get the process segmented and get the report out of the system. So if you take certain steps, like send the candidates to hiring manager is actually a step in the Workday platform. We have a clock and a timestamp on when that stuff went out to the manager and then when they came back with some of their responses on feedback. And then we can also measure things like, time once the offer's been put into, approval stage, verbal, written, and we can break down, okay, well, it took you a week to approve the offer. We got, but yet we got it back from the candidate in a day, like we can break down the cycle and be able to report out to the management and say, or the hiring managing teams to explain why it takes 90 days. Well, 45 days were your interview team getting approvals. So half of that time is on you and let's figure out how we can make that better.
Yeah, Joe, we track that as well with my teams here. It's been helpful when we go to leader meetings. I sat with our CTO a few weeks ago and he was like, well, where's the bottleneck? And I was like, well, our technical assessment sits for 14 days because we don't have enough people to do them. And quickly got a bunch of people to come in and help us solve that problem. So
information, it's helpful.
Yeah, and I think it's important to hold them accountable. Like when I was at, my old company, they would complain that these positions were taking so long and to fill. And I would say, hey, when I send you a candidate, you have 48 hours to let me know whether you want to move forward with it or not. Like I did my part. I drilled them, I asked those really hard questions. So now you have 48 hours because if I just let them decide when, they'll like never get back to me. And so then when we restructured our recruiting team. So now was an umbrella under the chief of HR. And then we had director of talent acquisition. She would then go back to the hiring managers and say, we submitted X amount of applicants to you and you didn't respond to them in 48 hours. And why? So you can't complain to my team, to us that we're not getting back to you or it's taking so long when you yourself aren't being held accountable, to the standard. So it's really important to kind of still instill that in them. Like, hey, you still also have a timeline. We need this, but again, it's just,
if you want us to operate on metrics, then there's also metrics on your side.
Yeah.
You'll have, metrics around your availability on interview scheduling, how long you take to give us feedback on the candidates, right? The approval times, all those types of things have to be a factor because it's just a one-way situation otherwise.
Yeah. And Sean, I liked how you were talking about like the metrics. Like I had a recruiter under me that I oversaw who would make like 100+ calls a day. And I would like, you brought in like 2 resumes this week.
Right.
Like, what's going on? And he's like, make more calls. And I was like, no, actually, please make less calls, but better calls, like more efficient.
Yeah,
like,
more efficient.
Like,
absolutely.
come on. Like, he's like, so make less calls. I'm like, but they have to be worth. And then I had one recruiter under me that he would talk for like an hour. And I was like, what are you doing talking for an hour? It was like, well, he asked me like, how do you guys get, your 100 calls a day or 80 calls a day? Like, how do you get all these resumes? He's like, I could barely get 35 calls a day. I'm like, well, you're talking for like an hour to some of these candidates about whatever now. So it's the metrics are good because it helps you to see where the issue may be. And each person might be different.
Yeah, I think that part of that is that some people just have the thought that it's quantity over quality. And that's a problem, right? Because we can't be productive that way. I could not make 100 calls a day. I would be unemployed. There's no way that I could do that and still be sane at the end of the day.
Same here.
And and it's not like, because again, like depending on what you're making, are you making those calls because you have is this how you're building your pipeline? Like, one, you'll never build a pipeline doing that. But if you're actually working on a role, you're never going to get that role filled because all you're doing is talking to people. So, I put 30 minutes on the calendar for a candidate, and I try to keep them to it. When I see them, veering off, I'm like, okay, we have 10 more minutes, because I know not only do I have to make other calls, I have to follow up on emails, I have to check in with my managers. There's so many things that I need to do, but you can have a quality call in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
You have to be focused and really what the point of your call is. What are you trying to get out of your candidate? And for me, if I don't get it and I hit that 30-minute mark, I don't mind rescheduling and doing another call, but I can't just sit on the phone endlessly and have those conversations with people. Like, it's just not a good use of my time.
And I still am a big, believer in picking up the phone and having that actual conversation with candidates. That's, I think, a no-brainer, because, again, you can hear how they speak, you can hear their tone.
Use Zoom for your screening or no?
Do I what?
Zoom. Do you guys use Zoom at all? Anyone?
I only use Zoom if somebody's gonna hey, we're gonna have a Zoom panel interview. I want to we're gonna Zoom. Show me where you're gonna do your meeting, dress up, everything, because I want to be
screening calls. You do the calls for screening, and you do the Zoom for a formal interview.
Yeah. I want to make sure, and but it's. And there's so many other ways now that you can reach candidates that it's not just 100 calls a day, right? I mean, you have LinkedIn, text messaging. I'm a huge fan of texting candidates because I'm like, hey, you may not get my email, but you're going to definitely get my text. So call me when you can, or let's chat, or hey, this is Myra with blah, blah, blah. And sometimes they're like, I'm in a meeting, but yeah, let's schedule a time. And versus an email can take me so much longer to get a response back to.
Yeah, we use WebEx. So when I'm setting up my phone screens, I can make it a video, or I can make it, just a call. But now that we're in this space where everything is happening virtually, I've been doing some of my phone screens have actually been video calls. And that's helpful because, to your point, Myra, I get to say, so when you have your interview, you probably shouldn't sit in that room, maybe close the door.
Don't wear that. Don't wear that.
Yeah, I mean, I have an email that I send to all of my candidates, usually a day or so before they have a video interview with the manager, and it's just a couple of bullet points on how to prepare for that interview. And it's simple. It's act like this is an in-person interview. You are going to be on camera. Dress, it's business casual because everyone's sort of dressing down, but this is not an opportunity for you to show up in a t-shirt and a hat turned backwards. Mm-hmm. You should be in a quiet space, try to control the noise, close a door, close windows, just because if you were going into a physical interview, you would be taking all of those things into account as you prepare to even go to the building. Do those same things at home because it matters. The manager is looking for those things. I will share a funny story. It's really quick. I had a manager who did a video interview with a gentleman, and she said 45 minutes was the call, and he spent 30 of it wrangling his dog. She said the dog physically came in the room and was jumping on him, and he was like, good. And she was like, are you kidding me? She called me immediately. She's like, Shawnee. And I'm like, listen, I didn't video him. I didn't know he had a dog.
And it's always when you don't do it. It's something so simple. When I get somebody that's going to go on site, I send them wear minimal jewelry, wear minimal fragrance, dress to impress. Because you something that you think they would know. The one time you don't send it, I get a call.
I talked to
Myra, she's wearing, they're wearing jeans. They're wearing jeans and to the interview. I know we're Barstow, but or I think it was Bakersfield. I know we're Bakersfield, but jeans to an interview. And it was I am so sorry. The one time you don't do it, something happens. So.
And, and I also say to people too, don't focus on the industry, because a lot of times candidates will think, oh, well, if it's marketing or if it's this or if it's that, then I can be a little bit more lax. You get one time to make a first impression. That's it. Mm-hmm. Go back. You don't get a do-over. There's no second chances. So walk into that space dressed for the job that you want, dressed like you deserve to be there, and you want the respect of the person sitting on the other side of the table. And if you walk in there and you don't look like that, there's not a whole lot for us to talk about when it's over. It doesn't matter if the person who interviews you is wearing jeans and flip-flops. They already have the job. That's a space that you want. You have to work to that. And so after that dog incident, I was like, okay, I guess all my intakes have to be videos so I can try to figure out what's going on in people's lives before I, set them on my hiring managers. But I think also for people too, what I find is that it brings down some of the stress and attention when they get to see me. I'm not just a voice on the phone. And I'm saying to you like, hey, I'm going to give you some tools. I want you to be really prepared. I want you to be in good shape when you meet with the manager. So let's talk about some do's and don'ts of interviewing. And part of that comes from my old school. I used to work for the Department of Labor and I did job readiness training. So I spent 8 hours a day telling people the do's and don'ts of getting ready for interviews, how to speak, how to sit, make eye contact, shake hands, use the bathroom first, arrive early. All of those things are still in play, even though things are virtual.
Hey, everybody.
Hey guys, I've got a meeting that I've got to run to, so
Yeah,
I'm jump off, but
thanks,
great
Sean.
meeting with you all.
Yeah, if anybody had any last comments, we can jump into that. Sean, hey, free to jump off. But if anybody else
I've got to run, but
no worries.
Thanks.
If anybody had any final closing comments, we'll sort of wrap it up.
Well, I think this just adds to what the misconception of recruiting is, right? Like you didn't realize that we were giving people fashion advice and we were giving people, like video. And I think so many times recruiting is referenced to as dating, right? It's such a huge thing of like you want to make the first impression with this person because you want to get that call back. Like you want them to call you back and you gotta look good, you gotta smell good, like all that stuff, and you gotta sound good. And even as an internal recruiter, like I put that on my candidates because I want my hiring managers to know that I'm not just sending them candidates just because they applied online. Right. And I get that because as an internal, they think, well, I'm not getting applicants. And I go, it's okay. Like that doesn't mean that I'm not looking for you, right? I'm still sourcing. I'm still finding these people because, I source for all of the West Coast, or I recruit for all West Coast, and West Coast right now is crazy. Oakland, San Jose, San Francisco, LA, all my hotspots right now are hotspots in the nation. And people aren't just going to apply for, I'm looking for Oakland right now. I have to go out there and look for them. And so I still carry that. And I think somebody mentioned in the comments that one of the things that kind of moved me a little bit outside of third party for healthcare is that a lot of hospitals are going to third party formats. They're going to third party structuring because they know that it works. They know that it's successful. And I don't know if other industries are doing this, but I know for healthcare, they now have a sourcing team and they have executive recruiters that do the hard to fill leadership positions, and it's structured so much like that. And it was a way for me to kind of like educate them on how to actually do it versus again, HR just kind of trying to build this team and they didn't have that experience. But it's still something that's very real within, or I think it's something that it's not real and internal, but it has to, if it was, it would be better.
Joe, any closing comments?
No, I thought this was great. I appreciate you inviting me, and it was fun to be part of it.
My pleasure. This one went deep and long on
I know. Right?
Yeah, Shawnee, anything to close?
I'll just say to anyone listening who's outside of HR, just remember that as recruiters, we're people too. Extend us a little bit of grace. We are doing the best that we can. We want to match the right person to the right role. And we care about your relationship. We care about our relationship with you, whether we hire you for the role or we build you into our LinkedIn connections or just into some pipelines that could be viable later down the line. So we will extend you some grace as candidates, and we ask that you do the same for us.
I'll close it with this. When people registered for the event, I asked them, what is one misconception that they believe is in recruiting? And I think the most popular answer was people think it's easy. I think this whole conversation kind of fell under that umbrella. Yeah. I got into it thinking, this is a win-win situation. This will be easy. People want to hire, people want to work. And then it's not the case.
you'd think.
Oh, if only.
I know. But we're still in it, right? It's like, it's so hard, but why am I still doing this?
And we're still here.
I keep waiting for a sitcom to be made out of a recruiting team.
Yes, that's what I say too.
Yeah, so
That would
stories
be
every time.
amazing.
That could be your next job.
who knows? All right. Well, hey, thanks everybody. Great
Thank you
conversation.
so much
Really
for
appreciate it. Sorry we ran long.
Thanks,
but
guys. Nice meeting you guys.
They're meeting you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.